I witnessed my in-law fling a suitcase into the river. What I found inside chilled me completely. I watched my daughter-in-law's car tear down the dirt road like it was running from a crime. Dust billowed behind her silver sedan as it screeched to a stop beside Lake Juniper. From my back porch, sweet tea halfway to my mouth, I froze. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. That was Sloan's car. My late son's widow. The last time I'd seen her had been 3 weeks earlier, at Marcus's memorial. She'd cried like the world had ended. Now she was driving like she wanted to end someone else's. She jumped out, hair wild, cheeks flushed, moving with frantic, jerky motions. She yanked open the trunk so hard I thought the lid would snap. Then I saw it, a brown leather suitcase. My brown leather suitcase. The one I'd given her as a wedding gift. To carry your dreams wherever you go, I told her back then, with more hope than sense. It looked heavy in her hands. Her shoulders strained, her arms trembled. She kept glancing around, jumpy, like she was afraid someone might be watching. Sloan. I shouted from the porch. If she heard me, she ignored me. She trudged to the water's edge, each step as if she were dragging a guilty conscience behind her. She swung the suitcase once, twice. On the third swing, she heaved it into the lake. The splash split the warm September afternoon in half. The suitcase bobbed for a few seconds, then began to sink, heavy leather darkening as water swallowed it. Sloan spun back to the car, slammed her door, tires screaming as she sped away. And then there was silence. For a moment I just stood there, 63 years old and suddenly ice cold. My name is Eleanor Whitlock, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'd been living alone ever since I buried my only child 8 months earlier. The house by the lake had become a museum of echoes and memories. But whatever Sloan had just done, that wasn't normal. That wasn't grief. That was panic. By the time my brain caught up, my legs were already moving. I flew down the porch steps, cut across the yard, and raced toward the shore. My knees protested. My chest burned. Lake Juniper sat about 300 feet away, and I felt every inch of those years between 30 and 63. The suitcase was still floating, listing and sinking by degrees. I didn't think so. I just waded in. The water was shockingly cold, climbing from my knees to my waist. Mud sucked at my bare feet, trying to claim me too. I reached the bag, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It felt like trying to drag a boulder through molasses. My arms shook from the effort. Water splashed into my face. My skirt and blouse clung to me, heavy and dripping. I finally hauled the suitcase onto the muddy bank and collapsed beside it, panting. That's when I heard it. A faint, muffled sound from inside. A tiny broken noise that didn't belong to any object. My blood turned to ice. Please God, don't let it be what I think it is, I whispered, my fingers fumbling for the zipper. The metal teeth were slick and half-rusted, waterlogged. It stuck once, twice. Come on, I muttered, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip. Come on. At last the zipper tore loose. I opened the lid, and the world went silent. Inside, wrapped in a soaked powder blue blanket, lay a newborn baby. Tiny. Still. Lips blue, skin pale. His head fit in the hollow of my palm. His umbilical cord had been tied off with a piece of string, ordinary twine, not a medical clamp. For a second, my heart simply forgot how to beat. No, 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 I breathed. I pressed my ear to his chest. Nothing. Then I lowered my cheek to his nose. There it was. The faintest whisper of breath. So weak I thought I might have imagined it. He was barely breathing, but he was breathing. Instinct took over. I scooped him up with more care than I'd shown anything in years. He was cold as river stones. Too light. Too quiet. I ran. I sprinted back to the house, shoes lost somewhere along the way, feet tearing on gravel and sticks. I didn't feel any of it. I only felt his weight against my chest and the hollow terror in my gut. I burst into the kitchen, one arm beneath the baby, the other groping for the wall phone. My fingers slipped on the buttons as I dialed. 911. What is your emergency? A calm woman's voice asked. A baby. I found a baby in the lake. He's blue, he's cold, he's barely breathing. Please send help, I stammered, my voice breaking apart. Ma'am, I need you to take a breath and tell me your address. I forced the information out while she walked me through what to do. Place him on a flat surface, she instructed. I swept the kitchen table clear with one arm. Plates shattered on the floor. I didn't care. I laid him down, my hands hovering. Do you see any movement in his chest? She asked. I leaned close until my vision blurred. There, a shallow rise. Barely. Yes, I choked out. Very slight. Good. Dry him off and warm him up as best you can. Wrap him in clean towels. The ambulance is on the way. I ran for the bathroom, snatched every towel in sight, and gently patted the icy water from his tiny body. Then I wrapped him like something sacred and pressed him against my chest, rocking without even thinking, murmuring nonsense. Hold on, little one, I whispered. Please hold on. Somebody's coming. You're not alone. The sirens eventually shattered the quiet. Red and white lights flashed across my front yard and through the kitchen windows. 2 paramedics rushed in, an older man with a grizzled beard and a younger woman with dark hair pulled back. The woman's hands were fast and steady as she took the baby, checked his breathing, and listened with her stethoscope. Severe hypothermia, she said. Possible water inhalation. We need to move. They loaded him into the ambulance, secured tiny sensors to his skin, fitted a mask over his mouth and nose. The older medic looked at me. You're riding with us. It wasn't a question. Inside the ambulance, everything felt too bright, too loud. The baby looked impossibly fragile under all that equipment. How did you find him? The medic asked, not pausing in her work. In a suitcase, I said, voice shaking. In the lake. I saw someone throw it in. She flicked a glance at me. Concern. Suspicion. Pity. All of it. Did you see who it was? I hesitated. The image of Sloan at the water's edge flashed behind my eyes. The same woman who had sobbed beside me at Marcus's grave. The same woman who had just tossed a suitcase containing a newborn into a lake. Yes, I said finally. I saw her. We reached the hospital in what felt like seconds and a lifetime. The doors flew open, and a crowd of nurses and doctors swept the baby away through double doors. When I tried to follow, a nurse stopped me with a gentle but firm hand. Ma'am, you need to wait here, she said. Her badge read Diane. Her voice was soft but steady. They're working on him. We'll need some information. She led me to a waiting room with plastic chairs and walls the color of watered-down cream. The smell of disinfectant filled my lungs. My clothes were still damp. My hair dripped onto the floor. Tell me everything from the beginning, she said, tablet in hand. So I did. From the dust cloud on the dirt road to the zipper on the suitcase, to the tiny breath I'd felt on my cheek. Diane took notes quietly, her eyes kind. The police will want to speak with you, she said when I finished. What you described, that's attempted homicide. The words landed like stones. A short time later, a doctor appeared, looking not much older than my Marcus. Dark circles framed his eyes. The baby is stable for now, he said. He's in the neonatal intensive care unit. He's very weak. The next 48 hours are critical. Will he live? I asked, clinging to the question like a life raft. I don't know, he said honestly. But we'll do everything we can. Then the police arrived. A woman with sharp eyes and her hair in a tight bun introduced herself as Detective Sergeant Ava Johnson. A younger officer hovered nearby with a notebook. They asked me to repeat everything. Where I'd been standing. What time it was. What the car looked like. How sure I was about who I'd seen. Are you certain it was your daughter-in-law? Ava asked, watching my face carefully. Completely, I said. I'd know that car anywhere. I'd know her anywhere. They exchanged a look that made my stomach twist. You'll need to come to the station tomorrow to give a full statement, Ava said. In the meantime, do not contact Sloan. At all. Understood. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Back in that sterile room where a baby I'd pulled from a suitcase was fighting for his life. Diane eventually brought a blanket and a set of hospital scrubs so I could change out of my soaked clothes. I stayed in that hard plastic chair all night, watching the clock, asking the nurses for updates. Stable, they said. Critical, but stable. He's fighting. Around 3 a.m., Reverend Thomas from my church arrived. Someone must have called him. He sat beside me in silence for a long time, rosary in hand. God tests us in ways we don't understand, he said finally. This doesn't feel like a test, I replied. It feels cruel. He didn't argue. He just stayed. Morning came as a pale orange wash through the windows. I hadn't slept. My back ached. My eyes burned. Every time I closed them, I saw the suitcase sinking. At 9 o'clock, Detective Ava returned with a folder and a harder expression. She sat across from me, opened the file, and slid a photograph across the table. It was Sloan's car. Same make, same plate. Parked outside a supermarket 30 minutes away. The timestamp read 5:20 p.m., 10 minutes after I'd seen her at the lake. My heart stuttered. That's impossible, I said. There has to be a mistake. Security camera footage rarely lies, Ava answered. Ellie, I need you to be honest with me. What is your relationship with Sloan like? Any tension? Resentment? And just like that, the ground shifted. Suddenly it wasn't about the woman who had thrown the suitcase. It was about me. Because I had never trusted Sloan. Not from the day Marcus brought her home. And now, with the baby upstairs and the evidence on the table, it started to look very much like I might be the one no one believed. By midday, I was numb. Between Ava's questions and my own doubts, nothing felt solid anymore. I knew what I'd seen at the lake. I also couldn't argue with a timestamp printed in cold black digits. As grief and exhaustion blurred the edges of my memory, ugly thoughts crept in. What if I'd been wrong? What if my mind had pasted Sloan's face onto someone else's body because I already blamed her for Marcus's death? A social worker arrived that afternoon. She looked barely older than my son had been when he died. Short hair, sharp suit, tablet in hand, polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm Marcy, from Child Protective Services, she said, taking a seat beside me. We need to talk about the baby's immediate future. I told the story again, from the dirt road to the hospital. She listened, nodding, typing. Do you live alone? She asked. Yes. Stable income? I have my late husband's pension and some savings. Any criminal record? Mental health diagnoses? I hesitated. I took antidepressants for a few months after my son died. My doctor said it was normal. I don't take them anymore. She typed that too. The baby will need a temporary placement once he's medically stable, Marcy said. He'll stay in state custody for now. We'll look for a certified foster family. Foster care. The words tasted wrong. He doesn't have anybody. He has me. You're not a legal relative, she said gently. You're a stranger who found him. And, to be transparent, you are also connected to an active criminal investigation. I did nothing wrong, I snapped. I pulled him out of the lake. I called 911. I know, she said, lifting a hand. And we're grateful you intervened. But the system has procedures. Our job is to protect the child. That means background checks, home assessments, psychological evaluations. It takes time. How long? I whispered. If you decide to apply to foster him yourself, and if everything goes quickly, 6 weeks. Maybe 3 months. 3 months. I felt dizzy. He'd be with strangers for 3 months. He'd be in a licensed home, she corrected. You could visit. Under supervision. Under supervision. As if I might hurt him. As if I hadn't been the only thing between him and the bottom of a lake. What if I want to look after him? The words slipped out before I could stop them. What if I want to be his guardian? Marcy studied me. You're 63. Again, I'm not saying no. But your age, your recent trauma, and the ongoing investigation will all be factors. Too old. Too fragile. Too suspicious. It felt like a verdict. That night, Diane convinced me to go home for a few hours. You need a proper shower and dry clothes, she said. If anything changes, I'll call you myself. I drove home in a daze. When I reached the spot by the lake where I'd waded into the water, I stopped the car. The police had already taken the suitcase as evidence, but I could still see the groove in the mud where I'd dragged it. I stood there as the sun went down, hugging my arms around myself. Who are you, little one? I thought. Who tried to erase you from the world before you even had a chance? My phone rang as darkness settled. It was Diane. Miss Whitlock, you need to come back, she said. Now. The ride back to the hospital felt endless. Every worst-case scenario barreled through my mind. When I rushed through the ER doors, Diane met me. He's alive, she said immediately. The baby's still with us. Come with me. There's something you need to hear. She led me not to the NICU, but to a small conference room. Detective Ava was there. Marcy was there. And a man in a dark suit with wire-rimmed glasses sat at the table with a folder in front of him. Please sit, Ava said. My legs were jelly, but I sat. This is Dr. Ernest Soda, she continued. Forensic genetics. We ran a DNA panel on the baby. We needed to know if he had any biological matches in the system. I frowned. Why would you? Dr. Soda opened the folder and slid a page toward me. Numbers and percentages swam before my tired eyes. The baby is male, he said calmly. Estimated age, 3 days. More importantly, his DNA shares approximately 25% overlap with yours. I blinked. What does that mean? It means, he said, that he is your biological grandson. The room tilted. That's not possible, I whispered. Marcus never had children. Your son died 8 months ago, Ava said gently. But based on medical estimates, this baby was conceived roughly a month before the accident. Which means Sloan was already pregnant when Marcus died. My chest tightened. Marcus had never told me. Sloan had never mentioned it. Nobody had said a word. So she carried him in secret. For 9 months, I murmured. Never told anyone. Gave birth alone. And then thrown him in a lake. Why? I asked out loud. Why would she hide a pregnancy? Why try to kill him afterward? That's exactly what we need to find out, Ava replied. There's something else you need to know. After the accident, Marcus's car was logged as a simple skid on wet pavement. But in light of this, we took another look. She slid another report across the table. The brakes were tampered with, she said. Intentionally. The damage was subtle but deliberate. This wasn't just bad weather. Someone sabotaged the car. The words sliced through me. You're saying, my son was murdered. That's our working theory, Ava said. And given what we now know, that his wife was secretly pregnant, that she vanished after the incident at the lake, that she can't be found at her last known address, Sloan is our primary suspect. I staggered to my feet and walked to the small window, staring out at the city lights. All those nights I'd lain awake, thinking it was somehow my fault for not calling him more. For not telling him to drive carefully. For not praying harder or something equally useless. All those nights. And the truth was this. Someone had killed my son on purpose. And the baby. I asked hoarsely. Legally, he's now a relative, Marcy said. Which means you can apply for kinship custody. You'd have more standing than a regular foster applicant. But the process doesn't change. Background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations. It will still take time. I don't care how many hoops I have to jump through, I said, turning back to them. He's Marcus's child. My grandson. I will not let him vanish into a file cabinet. Marcy nodded slowly. If that's truly what you want, we'll start the paperwork. Ava leaned forward. Ellie, we also need your help. Sloan is missing. We've frozen her accounts, flagged her passport. We've located a relative up near Tucson, an aunt who says she hasn't seen Sloan in 2 years. But if you remember anything, old arguments, mentions of special places, friends out of state, we need those details. I tried to think of every conversation I'd ever had with Sloan. Every holiday. Every polite small talk in my kitchen. For 3 years there had been so many words, yet almost nothing real. She mentioned an aunt near the border once, I said slowly. Marcus told me they didn't get along. That's all I know. It's a start, Ava said, jotting it down. We'll follow up. When they finally left, Diane touched my shoulder. Do you want to see him? She asked. I nodded, unable to speak. We scrubbed our hands and pulled on gowns before stepping into the NICU. Beeping monitors and soft whispers filled the dim room. Diane led me to a clear plastic incubator. There he was. So small. A knit cap hugged his head. Wires traced from his chest and limbs to machines that watched every heartbeat. His little chest rose and fell with more effort than any breathing should require. He has your nose, you know, Diane murmured. He actually had Marcus's, straight and narrow, but the idea made me smile faintly. Can I touch him? I asked. Just a finger through the port, she said. I slid a hand through the opening and laid my fingertip against his palm. His tiny fingers curled reflexively around it. Something inside me cracked open. Hello, little man, I whispered, my eyes burning. I'm your grandmother. I didn't know you existed 3 days ago. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Diane smiled. He'll need a name for the chart until the courts sort things out, she said. Any ideas? Marcus had mentioned once, over Christmas dinner, that if he ever had a boy, he'd name him after my father. Elijah, I said softly. His name is Elijah. I stayed in that chair beside the incubator until my back screamed and my eyes could barely focus. But I didn't move. Because the days when I had nothing left to live for were gone. I have a grandson now. And I was going to fight for him. The next weeks blurred into a rhythm of alarms and appointments. Every morning I woke before dawn, showered, and drove to the hospital. I sat beside Elijah's incubator, humming old lullabies and telling him stories about a father he'd never met. In the afternoons, a parade of officials came with clipboards and checklists. Marcy brought the first list. Background check, medical exam, psychological evaluation, home inspection, child care training course, she read, the words rolling out like items from a grocery list. You'll also need 3 personal references, non-family, and proof of stable income. She slid the papers toward me. It felt like someone had dumped the contents of a filing cabinet in my lap. How long will all this take? I asked. If everything goes smoothly, 6 weeks, she said. Then a judge will decide on temporary custody. After that, we monitor for 6 months before a permanent ruling. 6 weeks. 6 months. When you're almost 64, time doesn't feel as elastic as it used to. Reverend Thomas agreed to be a reference without hesitation. Anyone who needs proof you're fit to raise a child can come spend one Sunday listening to you fuss over the church nursery, he said. Diane, off the record, coached me through the medical forms. They're going to look hard at your health, she warned. Blood pressure, mobility, stamina. Be honest, but don't sell yourself short. The physical exam went better than I expected. My doctor pronounced me remarkably sturdy for your age, which sounded like a compliment dug out of an antique store, but I took it. The psychological evaluation was harder. A young therapist with oversized glasses sat across from me, hands folded on a notepad. "How did you cope after your son's death?" she asked. "I didn't," I said truthfully. "Not at first. And now? I get out of bed," I answered. "I go to the hospital. I hold my grandson's hand. That's enough for today." She asked whether I blamed Sloan for Marcus's death, whether Elijah was a replacement, whether I understood the demands of raising a child at my age. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," I said, jaw tight. "I'm trying to keep a little boy alive and loved. That's it." The home inspection came next. 2 women from CPS walked through my house, looking into every drawer like they expected to find a skeleton. "You'll need cabinet locks, outlet covers, a crib that meets current safety standards," one said, making notes. "Smoke detectors on every floor. A fire escape plan." I spent nearly everything left in my savings on baby gear. A crib. A changing table. A second-hand rocking chair. Safety gates for the stairs. It hurt to watch the numbers in my bank account drop, but I would have emptied it entirely if it meant Elijah could come home. Then there was the child care course. They put me in a room with 15 women in their 20s and 30s. The instructor, a young woman who looked like she still lived on iced coffee, demonstrated how to change a diaper like she was presenting a scientific discovery. "Newborns usually eat every 2 to 3 hours, she said slowly, as if we were learning an obscure language. I nodded and took notes, because I needed the certificate more than I needed my pride. Back at the hospital, Elijah grew stronger. The tubes slowly disappeared, first the breathing support, then some of the monitoring wires. He began to feed from a bottle. His cry grew louder, angrier, more alive. "You're defying every chart we have," one doctor told me one afternoon. "Babies with his level of hypothermia don't usually recover this well." "He's stubborn," I said, stroking his tiny fingers. "Just like his daddy." Meanwhile, Ava kept digging into the past. "We tracked down Sloan's aunt near Tucson," she said one day, catching me in the hallway. "They haven't spoken in years. There was some bad blood over money. Sloan borrowed $3,000 and never paid it back." "Money," I repeated. It always came back to that. Marcus had been an engineer, careful and steady. He'd saved for years. He'd taken out a life insurance policy. He'd been the kind of man who planned for emergencies. "She collected his policy 4 months ago," Ava continued. $200,000. Within 2 weeks, most of it was transferred to an offshore account. We're working with financial crimes to follow the trail. "So she killed him," I said quietly, "and then stashed the money somewhere they couldn't reach." "We're not ready to say that on record," Ava replied. "But yes, that's what it looks like." A few days later, while cleaning out Marcus's old room to make space for Elijah one day, I found something that cinched it. A leather journal, worn at the edges, wedged at the bottom of a box. I'd never known my son kept a journal. The early entries were about work and hobbies, office politics, football games, little observations. But as I flipped nearer to the end, her name appeared again and again. Sloan laughed when I told her about my promotion. She said now she could finally buy that handbag she wanted. I joked that she liked my paycheck more than me. I'm not sure she thought it was a joke. A few days ago she was going through my bank statements, by accident. When I asked why, she got defensive. Something feels off. Then the entries about the pregnancy. I found a positive test in the bathroom. I asked Sloan, and she looked terrified. She said she didn't want a screaming burden, that it would ruin her plans. I can't wrap my head around that. It's our baby. She refuses to tell anyone. Says she needs time. I changed my mind today. If anything happens to me, everything goes to my child, not to her. I don't trust her with the money. Not anymore. The last entry made my hands shake. She threatened me today. Said I'd regret trying to force her to keep the baby. I'm scared in a way I've never been scared before. I'm going to talk to Mom tomorrow. She'll know what to do. I won't let anyone hurt my child. He died that night before he could talk to me. I took the journal to Ava the next day. She read the last pages, her jaw tightening. This is huge, she said. It shows premeditation and motive. We'll enter it into evidence. A few days after that, she had more news. We pulled phone records, she told me. Sloan called an independent mechanic multiple times the week before the accident. His name is Calvin Jones. At first he denied everything, but once we showed him bank records of cash deposits that matched calls from Sloan. He talked. I finished. He admitted she paid him to tamper with the brakes, Ava said. $2,000 up front. $3,000 promises later. He's under arrest as an accomplice. He's terrified. He says she seemed calm when she made the deal. Like she was ordering a pizza. I felt sick. She killed Marcus, I whispered. Because he'd protect Elijah. Because he changed his will. It appears so, Ava replied quietly. And when the baby was born, she realized he now had a legal claim to the money. She tried to eliminate him too. And she's still out there, I said. For now, Ava said. But she's running out of places to hide. 6 weeks after I dragged a suitcase from a lake, I sat in a courtroom. The judge, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, paged through a thick file containing every evaluation, every report, every visit from Child Services. It is highly unusual for a 63-year-old to apply for custody of a newborn, she said, looking over her glasses at me. It is even more unusual for that newborn to be the only surviving child of a murdered son and a mother currently wanted for attempted homicide. My heart thudded. But I have spoken to the hospital staff, reviewed the social workers' reports, and read the letters from your community, she continued. They all say the same thing, that you are dedicated, that the child is thriving in your care, and that if not for you, he would not be alive. The room went completely still. Therefore, she said, I am granting temporary custody of the minor child Elijah to his paternal grandmother, Eleanor Whitlock, for a period of 6 months. During that time, there will be monthly visits from CPS and continued evaluations. At the end of that period, we will review for permanent placement. Her gavel came down. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Congratulations, Marcy whispered. You did it. Not quite. But it was a start. 3 days later, after Elijah was discharged from the hospital, I carried him through my front door. His room, once Marcus's, was painted a soft yellow now. The rock band posters and trophies had given way to a mobile of stars over a brand new crib. I laid Elijah down gently. Welcome home, I murmured. That first night was chaos. My body had forgotten the relentless rhythm of newborn care. Feedings every few hours. Diapers. Crying that seemed to come from his toes and rattle the windows. At 30, doing this had been exhausting. At 63, it felt like running a marathon in molasses. My back ached. My knees popped. My eyes felt full of sand. But when he settled against my chest, warm and trusting, all of that faded. He was here. Alive. Safe at least for now. And I would burn the world down before I let anyone hurt him again. For a while, our world shrank to bottles and doctor visits. 3 times a week, Diane came by to help. She taught me tricks I'd forgotten, how to burp Elijah more easily, how to swaddle him so he slept longer than 20 minutes, and how to recognize the difference between a hungry cry and an I just feel like yelling cry. You're doing beautifully, she said whenever she caught me doubting myself. I didn't feel beautiful. I felt terrified. Because while I rocked Elijah to sleep, Sloan was still out there somewhere. We'd fortified the house. New locks on every door. An alarm system linked to the police. Security cameras covering the yard and porch. It all cost more than I wanted to admit. But fear has a way of rearranging your budget. One afternoon, while sorting through another box from Marcus's room, I found an old photo of him as a boy at the lake near an old wooden boathouse, our favorite fishing spot. Back when the world made sense. 3 months after the suitcase, my phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail. But something in my gut said the answer. "Hello," I said. Silence. Then a voice I recognized was like a bad dream. "Ellie," Sloan said. "Miss me? Every muscle in my body is locked." Elijah was napping in the next room. "Where are you?" I asked, glancing automatically at the windows. "That's not important," she replied. "What matters is what you have. And what I want." "You have nothing I want," I snapped. "Oh, I don't," she said, a cold laugh slipping through the line. "You have my son. And you have access to his money." "He's my grandson," I shot back. "And that money is his father's legacy, not your spending money." "You think the courts will agree with that?" she asked. "I'm his biological mother. If I walk into a police station and say you stole him, who do you think they'll believe? The grieving young widow, or the unstable grandmother who imagined seeing her toss a suitcase into a lake?" Anger flared hot in my chest. I put the phone on speaker and quietly started recording with my other hand. "You tried to drown him," I said. "We both know that." "It was a moment of panic," she said. "I'd given birth alone. I wasn't thinking clearly. But I've had time now. Time to reflect. I want to fix things. I want my son. And I want what's mine." "What's yours?" I repeated. "You mean the $500,000 meant for him?" "The insurance, the inheritance, call it what you want," she said. "Here's the deal, Ellie. You bring Elijah and $500,000 in cash or transferable accounts to the old boathouse at Lake Juniper. Tomorrow. Midnight. Alone. No cops. No tricks. You get to walk away. I get my life back. And if I say no?" Her answer was simple. "Then I will find you on my own. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But one day you'll look up from that baby and I'll be standing in your doorway. And I promise you I will take him." The line clicked dead. I sat there shaking, phone in one hand, the recording app still running in the other. Then I called Ava. She listened to the recording twice, her face hard. "This is what we've been waiting for," she said. "We can use this as leverage and as evidence. We'll set up at the boathouse. You go in wired. We cover the exits. She won't walk away this time. She'll see you," I said. "She's not stupid." "She won't," Ava said. "We'll be in the dark, outside her line of sight. Snipers on nearby roofs. Units at the back and sides. The second she incriminates herself, we move. Elijah will be nowhere near that place. You'll only be pretending to bring him." Everything inside me recoiled at the idea of walking into a trap with Sloan. But the alternative, living the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when she'd show up, felt worse. The next 24 hours crawled. I held Elijah longer than usual. I memorized the curve of his cheeks, the sound of his little snore, the way his fingers curled around mine, just in case. In the morning, Diane came to collect him. "He'll stay with me until this is over," she said. "I've got extra locks, and half the police department knows my address now. He'll be safe, Ellie." "I know," I said, but my voice trembled as I kissed his forehead. "Grandma will be back soon, little man. I promise." In the afternoon, Ava and 2 other detectives turned my dining room into a planning table. They laid out a map of the lake, marked entry points to the boathouse, and planned sightlines. "This is where our snipers will be," Ava said, tapping 2 nearby rooftops. "Assault team here, rear exit covered here. Your job is to keep her talking. Ask her why she did it. Make her brag. People like Sloan love to hear themselves explain how clever they are." "And if she pulls a gun?" I asked. One of the officers slid a tiny device across the table. It looked like a button. "That's your mic," he said. "We'll pin it under your collar. It transmits everything. If you tap it 3 times in a row, we take that as a panic signal and go in immediately. No waiting for confessions." I practiced tapping it. 1, 2, 3. "Remember," Ava said, looking me in the eyes. "You won't be alone there. We'll be listening the whole time. The moment we think you're in real danger, we move." At 11:15 p.m., I drove to the lake with my heart pounding loud enough to drown out the engine. Ava crouched low in the passenger seat, then slipped out when we turned onto the old access road, disappearing into the darkness. The boathouse stood ahead like a forgotten skeleton. It hadn't been used in years. The wood was gray, windows broken, graffiti scars along the side. The place where Marcus had learned to bait hooks had become the site where I would bait his killer. My phone buzzed at 11:59. "Go in." Alone. I got out of the car, the night air cold against my skin. I could see my breath, little white ghosts in the dark. The main door was slightly open. It creaked when I pushed it wider. Inside was almost pitch black. Thin lines of moonlight leaked through the broken windows, carving long shadows across the floor. "Sloan," I called, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "Close the door," she said from somewhere in the shadows. I did. As my eyes adjusted, her shape emerged near the center of the empty room. She was thinner than before, her hair cut short and badly bleached. But her eyes were the same, bright, hard, empty. "You came," she said. "Part of me didn't think you would." "You said you wanted to talk," I answered. "I want answers." "I said I wanted my son and my money," she corrected. "Where is he? Where's the cash?" "In the car," I lied. "But I'm not handing you anything until you tell me why. Why did you kill Marcus? Why did you try to kill Elijah?" She laughed softly. "Always so dramatic, Ellie. I didn't kill Marcus out of hatred. I did it because he was in the way." "He was your husband," I said. "He loved you." "He was boring," she replied. "Steady. Predictable. You know the type. And when I got pregnant, it ruined everything. I wanted to travel. Spend money. Live. Not be chained to a crib and a mortgage. So why marry him in the first place?" I asked, careful to keep my voice low, steady, open. "Because he was an engineer with a good salary and a fat life insurance policy," she said. "I figured I'd stay 5 years, then divorce him and take half. Easy plan. Until I saw those 2 pink lines. And when he changed his will," I said slowly, "so the money went to the baby, not to you." She rolled her eyes. "He suddenly turned into some noble father-to-be, talking about protecting our child and doing the right thing. He wouldn't shut up about custody lawyers and saving for college. He threatened to take the baby if I didn't cooperate." "So you adapted," I said, each word deliberate. "You paid a mechanic to sabotage his brakes. Collected his insurance. Gave birth in secret. Then decided to erase the only thing standing between you and the rest of his money." She smiled, a small, proud, horrible smile. "You really do understand," she said. "You're smarter than you look." My stomach twisted. The mic under my collar felt like it was burning a hole in my skin. "Why the lake?" I asked. "Why here?" "This place meant something to you and your perfect little boy," she said. "He told me you used to fish here. I thought it was poetic, ending your line right where it started." My fingers itched to hit the panic button, but I waited. One more question. One more clear admission. "And Elijah?" I asked. "You felt nothing, putting your own son into a suitcase?" She shrugged. "He was a problem. Now he's a bargaining chip. Funny how life works." Then she pulled a gun from the front pocket of her sweatshirt and pointed it at my chest. My breath froze. The room shrank until it was just me, her, and that small black barrel. Last chance, she said quietly. Where is he? I tapped the mic 3 times. He's never going back to you, I answered. Not while I'm alive. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The flash came before the sound. My shoulder exploded in pain. The impact knocked me backward, my legs giving way. I hit the floor hard, the world tilting. Then shouting. Lights. The door slammed open. Voices roared from every direction. Police. Drop the weapon. On the ground. I saw figures flooding in from side doors, beams of light pinning Sloan in place. She spun around, gun still in hand, feral and cornered. For a heart-stopping second, I thought she'd fire again. But instead, she let the gun drop. 3 officers tackled her, pinning her to the ground. She screamed, at me, at them, at the world, but it didn't matter. They had her. Ava knelt beside me, pressing something hard against my bleeding shoulder. Stay with me, Ellie, she said. Ambulance is on the way. You did it. She's in custody. My vision blurred, but I managed a shaky smile. Tell Elijah. I started, voice fading. Tell him Grandma kept her promise. Then the darkness finally caught up with me. I woke up to the antiseptic smell of yet another hospital room. For a moment, panic surged. Then I saw Elijah in Diane's arms, sitting in a chair near my bed. His round face lit up when he saw me stir. He bounced, babbling his baby sounds, kicking his chubby feet. There she is, Diane said, standing and bringing him closer. Someone's been very impatient waiting for you to wake up. The doctor said I was lucky. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed bone and vital organs by an inch. It hurt like the devil, but I was alive. Where's Sloan? I asked as soon as Ava appeared with flowers and a tired smile. In county lockup, she said. She's been charged with first-degree murder for Marcus, attempted homicide of Elijah, attempted homicide of you, insurance fraud, conspiracy, you name it. With your recording, her confession at the boathouse, and the mechanic's testimony, the DA has more than enough to put her away for life. Good, I said. It wasn't joy I felt. Not exactly. It was something heavier and quieter. Justice, maybe. Or simply the absence of constant dread. Months passed. My shoulder healed slowly. Physical therapy hurt, but every time I winced, I looked at Elijah learning to roll over, crawl, and eventually toddle, and thought, worth it. The trial, when it finally came, was brutal but short. They played the recording from the boathouse. The jury heard Sloan casually talk about my son's life as if she were returning a faulty appliance. They heard how she reduced Elijah to a problem to be solved. Calvin, the mechanic, testified with shaking hands about sabotaging the brakes. The financial experts walked the jury through the offshore accounts. Ava presented the timeline. The journal. The texts between Marcus and Sloan. Sloan's lawyer tried to spin it as postpartum psychosis, as coercion, as anything but what it was. The jurors didn't buy it. They came back in half an hour, guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was clear. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Some people cheered quietly in the pews. I didn't. I just sat there, Elijah asleep against my chest, and let out the longest breath of my life. I was free. Elijah was safe. 6 months after my temporary custody started, we went back before the family court judge. She skimmed through stacks of new reports. CPS home visits. Pediatric checkups. Psychological follow-ups. All of them told the same story. Elijah was thriving. You've done more than most people half your age would manage, the judge said, looking at me over her glasses. You've given this child a stable, loving home under extraordinary circumstances. I swallowed hard. Given that the biological mother has been convicted of violent crimes and has relinquished her parental rights, the judge continued, and given the absence of any other suitable relatives, I am granting full and permanent custody of Elijah to his grandmother, Eleanor Whitlock. She paused, then smiled slightly. If you wish, you may file to adopt him formally, she added. To make official what is already obvious. Yes, I said immediately. I want that. Then so ordered, she replied. Congratulations, Mom. Her gavel struck the block. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Diane and Reverend Thomas were waiting. They hugged me, tears in their eyes. You did it, Diane said. You really did. I didn't do it alone, I answered, looking down at Elijah, who was clapping just because the grown-ups were excited. But we're here. That's what matters. Years slipped by, measured in shoe sizes and school photos instead of court dates. Elijah's first word was, Nana, shouted triumphantly one morning as he launched himself into my arms. His first steps were from the coffee table to my lap, with Diane cheering like he'd just won a marathon. He started preschool at 3, came home talking about shapes and songs and a friend who liked dinosaurs as much as he did. We kept Marcus in our home the whole time. His photos hung on the walls, him as a baby, as a teenager with messy hair and a football trophy, as a grown man in his graduation gown, as a groom smiling beside the woman who had betrayed him. I told Elijah the truth about his father long before I told him the truth about his mother. Your daddy was a good man, I said one night as we curled up on the couch. Elijah was 4 and fascinated with stories. He was kind and smart and a little bit stubborn. He loved you before you were even born. He changed his whole life to protect you. Daddy hero, Elijah said, eyes wide. Yes, I said, my throat tight. Daddy was a hero. The darker parts, how Sloan had tried to kill both of them, how she had traded human lives for money, I saved for later. One day, when he's older and asks the inevitable questions, I'll tell him. He deserves to know where he came from, all of it. For now, he needs to know he is wanted, loved, worth fighting for. On his 5th birthday, we had a party in the backyard. Balloons tied to the fence. Cake with too much frosting. Kids from the neighborhood running wild. I sat on the porch with Diane, watching Elijah chase bubbles across the grass. What are you thinking about? She asked. That day, I admitted. The suitcase. The lake. How close I came to missing it. If I'd looked down to sip my tea 5 seconds earlier. If I hadn't heard that tiny cry. But you did hear it, she said. You did run. You did open the suitcase. That's what counts. I nodded. Still, the what-ifs hovered sometimes. What if I'd stayed numb after Marcus's death? What if I'd told myself I was too old to take on a baby? What if fear had kept me on that porch instead of driving me into the water? But I made a different choice. Again and again. I chose to wade into a cold lake. I chose to open a soaked suitcase even though I was terrified of what I'd find. I chose to fight a system that saw me as a statistic and an age, not a grandmother and a promise. It wasn't easy. There were nights when exhaustion made my bones feel hollow. Days when Elijah's crying and my aching shoulder and the arrival of yet another caseworker nearly broke me. Moments when I wondered if I'd been selfish to think I could do this at my age. Then he'd look at me. He'd grin and shout, Nana, and run into my arms, trusting that I would catch him. And I knew that if I had to, I would drag that suitcase out of the lake again. I would stand in that boathouse again. I would take that bullet again. Ava still stops by now and then, usually with some small toy from the department. Diane has become more family than friend. Reverend Thomas blesses our house every Christmas, calling Elijah living evidence that good can come from the worst our world has to offer. As for Sloan, she's a name in a file and a face in a mugshot now. Locked away where she can't hurt anyone else. Sometimes I wonder if she ever feels remorse. If she thinks about the child she tried to erase. Then I remember the way she smiled talking about Marcus's death, and I stopped wondering. Some people are missing whatever piece it is that lets the rest of us love. That's a tragedy in itself, but not my responsibility to fix. My responsibility is the boy who bursts into my room every morning, hair sticking up in 10 directions, eyes, Marcus's eyes, bright and full of tomorrow. "Good morning, Nana," he cries, launching himself onto the bed. And every morning, I pull him close, kiss his head, and think the same thing. I'm so glad I ran. If you've made it all the way through our story, thank you for spending this time with us. I'd love to know, did Elijah's journey touch you? And from which city are you listening or reading today? Imagine we're chatting after the story ends. Your comments, your thoughts, your support are what keep these life stories going. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe to more stories like it, and picture 2 more powerful life tales waiting for you on the screen, just a click away. Until the next story, sending you love, respect, and a reminder that sometimes, the smallest cry for help can change everything.